in the beginning we chant a small chant that you can find on the paper. 開教義が載っていると思います。無常人人未明法約千万語南祖具学根検問特十字願言如来真実義無常人人未明法約千万語南祖具学根検問特十字願言如来真実義無常人人未明法約千万語南祖具学根検問特十字願言如来真実義 A number of people already asked me some questions or gave me some topics that they would like to hear me say something about. One was the question, what is the meaning of life? Another person wanted to hear something about quitting the game. So what is that? What's the meaning of quitting the game? Somebody wanted to hear something about practice in daily life. Like, well, might be easy to practice during a retreat like this here at Antaiji, but how can you sustain practice in daily life? Or, well, what is practice in the first place, apart from Zazen, during the rest of the hours in the day? There was a question about, well, monkhood. What does it mean to be a monk? Then there was a very, how do you say, well, concrete question during Zazen. What can you do about pain? How to deal with pain during Zazen? Then there was another question, how to teach people who are not interested in Buddhism in the first place. いくつかの質問とかこういうことについて話してほしいというのがありました。一つは人生の意味。もう一つはゲームを降りること。これはそもそも何なのか、ゲームをやめる、ゲームを降りる。もう一つは日常の中のプラクティス。修行ですね。修行を英語で言うとプラクティスになるんですね。日本語で言うと修行とプラクティスとちょっとニュアンスが違うように受け取る人も多いと思いますけれども、修行だと厳しいイメージがありますけれども、本当はもう菩薩の道を実践する、厳しいとか厳しくないというのはあまり関係ないんですね。菩薩として生きる、これが修行であって、ですから英語ではプラクティス、それを実際にやる。 実践していく。で、日常の中、アンタジのような修行道場、こういうリトリートなら、一日の流れに沿っていけばできますけれども、家に帰って日常生活の中でどうしたらいいかという問い。What does it mean to be a monk? 僧侶になることの意味、僧侶とは何なのか、出家することの意味。特に、タイ、スリランカもそうですし、中国や韓国でも出家するということは家族を持たないという意味もありますけれども、日本では、そういうことでもないので、日本で出家をすることの意味はそもそも何だろう。ゆくゆく結婚して子供を持つならばそもそも出家と言えるかどうか、そういう意味も含まれているかもしれない。一つの具体的な質問としては、前種の痛み、痛いという思いとどう付き合えばよいか、この痛いのをどうしたらよいかという質問。これは仏教に全く関心のない人にどう教えたらよいのか、全く関心のない人に仏教をどう伝えたらよいかという問いもありました。それ以外に聞きたいこと、あるいは忘れているのもあるかもしれないんですし、これ以外にも聞きたいことがあればどうぞ、この時点でも。はい、じゃあ高橋さんから。
修行して座禅を一生懸命して、好きな人とか家族だとか、人を幸せにすることができるのかな。したいんですけど、
はい、
そうしたいんですけど、
はい、
そうなれるのか。
修行して家族とか他の人を幸せにできるか。英語にすると Can you make others happy through your practice? Happy. もう一つ、はい、お願いします。
輪廻転生はありますか？
はい。
輪廻転生はありますか？
Is there rebirth? Transmigration, rebirth is probably the right. 輪廻転生とか、仏教では輪廻転生と普通言いますけれども、死んでから生まれ変わる。Anything else that you don't find here on the whiteboard but you would like to ask as a topic?
I find every philosophy has its own dilemma. If you take something as the first hypothesis, then you cannot do other metaphysical thinking upon it. That means you have to take it for granted without any other response. And I find out that Zen, my own point from my own perspective is that the practitioner of Zen try to abandon all of those doctrine at least, and try to concentrate on the moment, just seize the moment and simply concentrate on it. And whenever there is some thoughts or some feelings, emotions, etc., just totally accept it without any further judgment. I mean, it is against if there is a doctrine, maybe it is the fact that Zen is against further judgment. But I think when it comes to philosophical thinking, then it also becomes a doctrine. So I don't know how to deal with it about the topic of hyoka. I mean, hyoka itself is a hyoka.
So, in short, what to do with judging? do about the habit that we judge things? About judging. 他に聞きたいこと、はい、お願いします。
私は普段大学で勉強してるんですけど、それで、そうですね、この道で行くぞというふうに決めたのにもかかわらず、その道に一生懸命励むことができないということがあります。で、ここに来たら一生懸命励んでる人を見て、一生懸命励むということを学べるかなと思ったんですけど、ここはネルテさんもおっしゃってるように、やっぱり大人の場所であって、仮に2時間座禅をするとしても、いくらでも怠けることはできるというわけで、ここに来てもやっぱ自分を変える、環境が自分を勝手に変えてくれるっていうことはないと思う。いいファンさんみたいでしょ。なんかずっと動く人もおるからはいはい。で、どうやったら、どこにいても、そういう問題が起こると、結局起こってしまうので、そういう励むことができない自分っていうのに対してどうやって対処するべきなのか、することができるのかっていうことについて伺いたいなと思います。ちょっと難しいけど。はい。
So, well, for the non-Japanese speakers, basically he's asking, or he's saying, well, he hoped that during the retreat, seeing others practice diligently would help him to become more diligent in his own life and follow his task. But he realized that Antaiji is a place for adult practice, so that every person is responsible for their own life and they are responsible for their own practice. So how can you, well, become able to do this adult practice? How can you practice as an adult? 大人の修行をどうしたらよいのか、大人として修行するのにどうしたらいいのか。How can you practice as an adult? で、大人として修行するということは、自分の修行は自分でするものだという、誰も手伝ってくれないんだという、自覚ですね。他にありますか？Anything else you would like to hear? 加藤さんはまだ何も聞いてないんですけど、なんかありますか？
さっきの輪廻転生とも近いかもしれないですけど、仏教で六神通っていうありますよね。
ありますね。
あれは無法さんどのように考えているのかっていうのをちょっと聞きたいです。
なるほど。はい。六神通というと、普通の人に見えないものが見えたり、聞こえないものが聞こえたり、
全部見えたりとか、さっきの輪廻転生と近いんです。
So he wants to know something about in Japanese it's called Rokujinzu. Well, there's also a chapter in the Shobogenzo. I think in English it's translated as mystical powers sometimes. Basically powers that transcend our ordinary powers, like clear vision, for example, where you can read other people's minds, you know, the future or the past, previous lifetimes and stuff like that. What about well, in Japanese it's Jintsu. That's also the title of the Shobogenzo chapter, Jintsu. Basically, mystical powers. 他にありませんか? Anything else? Okay, let's start with this, and if you have more questions and we have time later, we can discuss more. まず、人生の意味について about the meaning of life. The short answer is there's no meaning to life. Nobody knows why we were born, except for the fact that our parents had sex, obviously, but there seems to be no deeper meaning behind that. And like at one point, maybe as a kid, you ask yourself, why do I have to do my homework? Why do I have to go to school? One answer maybe is that if you don't do your homework, then your parents don't give you pocket money. So you want to have pocket money, so you do your homework and you try to get good grades, because then you get more pocket money and you get all the presents that you want for your birthday. So is the meaning of going to school and learning to get pocket money? Well, no. Actually, it's to prepare you for life, but preparing you for life in that case only means that when you study at school, you do your homework, you get good grades, you can go to a better high school, and then you can go to a good university, can study what you want to study, and if you don't have the good grades, you can't become a doctor, you can't become a lawyer, for example. But if you study, you can do that. You can get a good job. So the next question would be, well, what's the meaning to that? So why would I want to get a job in the first place? Why would I want to work all my life? 5 hours a week, maybe 6 hours a week, from morning until the evening. And the answer again is, well, you need some money to live. So basically, like for the kids, you want the pocket money, then you do your homework. You want money to enjoy yourself, to maybe buy a car, eventually build a house, then you have to work for that. And if you don't have money, you won't be popular with the girls. So if you want to have a girlfriend and maybe in the future a beautiful wife, you need a job. And to get a job, you need to study in school. So that's the meaning. That's the meaning. But then the next question is, well, why do I need a family and kids? What's the meaning of that? Because I will die, my partner will die, the kids will die, even if I have grandchildren, they all die. So that cannot be the meaning of life. Of course, the big car and the big house cannot be the meaning of life either, because you can't take them with you when you die. Maybe the meaning of life is to do something lasting for humanity, so to win a Nobel Prize and have your name in the history books in 100 years, 200 years. Very few of us will probably succeed at that, but if it's possible, will that give meaning to our life? Well, the answer again is no, because in probably 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, nobody will remember you anyway. Even if you do, well, for example, there's I think now the Future for Fridays for Future movement. I don't know so much about it except from the news. In my time, when I was young, the Green Party just started in Germany, and people were very concerned about the environment, and that's what probably the Fridays for Future kids are very concerned about, and you would be against nuclear power and stuff like this. And people discovered meaning in this kind of activity. So it's not that you try to get into the history books, but you do something, try to do something lasting for the planet itself, for nature, for the animals. But again, if you think on a longer span, like probably in 100 billion years, the planet won't exist anymore. That's a long time. But if the fact that in 100 years my life is not there anymore, if in 100 years I'm dead, so it doesn't really matter how much wealth I accumulate, then 100 billion years, it's much more. But if in 100 billion years the planet Earth doesn't exist, it's really hard to claim that, well, protecting the environment is meaningful. And, well, confronted with that, I'm afraid we have to say, well, there's no meaning of life. If you think it through, whatever you do, whatever you achieve, it's going to be gone at one point. So in that sense, there's no meaning to your life. Of course, probably nobody would have noticed if you hadn't been born into this world in the first place. Nobody would have noticed if your mother had an abortion before you were born. So in that sense also, there's really no meaning to the fact that you were born. How about suicide? In my case, I never really made a serious attempt at suicide, but I was thinking about it a lot when I was young. Already as a kid, I was thinking a lot about, well, that it's at least a possibility and would make things so much easier. Because, well, that's one of the later questions. But when you suppose that there's nothing coming after death, we cannot be sure. But somehow I thought, well, probably if I'm dead, there's nothing. It's going to be the end. In that case, well, there's no more problems. It would solve all problems. And so why not kill myself? In my case, although there was always this kind of temptation, I could always kill myself. The urge was never strong enough so that I would actually kind of buy a rope and already look for a tree where I could hang myself. But a couple of years ago, for example, we had a practitioner here who came, and in his bag, basically the bag was filled with this rope that he had brought with him, so in case he could kill himself. So basically Antaiji was for him the last try to find meaning in his life, and if I'm leaving Antaiji, I can use this rope to hang myself. So in my case, it was never that serious, and I also had the feeling that I wasn't so desperate that I want to die tonight, for example. I always had this feeling, well, if it gets really bad, I can still kill myself tomorrow. It wasn't so bad, and well, honestly, probably I didn't really want to die. I mean, if I really had wanted to die, I could have stopped breathing. And 10 minutes, 15 minutes probably would have been enough to die. But, well, interestingly, among those people that commit suicide, I don't know the present number in Germany. When I was young, it used to be about 10,000 people a year. In Japan, for a long time, it was more than 30,000 people in Japan. The suicide rate was very high. It's getting a little bit lower now, but it's still pretty high. But nobody commits suicide by stopping to breathe. People jump off buildings, they jump in front of trains, they hang themselves, they take medicine. In other countries where it's easy to get a gun, you shoot yourself. Sometimes people first, they shoot their neighbors and then they shoot themselves. Or their family and then they shoot themselves. But nobody just stops breathing. Probably the reason is very easy, because the part of us that wants to die is up here. But the rest of the body doesn't want to die. So we somehow have to kill our body to die. We cannot just kind of say, well, I don't want to live anymore, so I stop breathing. So there's at least two parts involved, and part of us wants to die, and this part has to kill the other part that doesn't want to die. Meaning of life. Getting back to the question of meaning of life, why wouldn't I want to commit suicide then if there's no meaning to life? Well, one part of the answer is this. Well, why then not stop breathing? Or on the other hand, if you cannot just stop breathing, why is that? Because your body wants to live. And your body doesn't need a meaning to live. Your brain always thinks about, well, what's the meaning to this? What's the meaning to that? What's the meaning to that? But actually, well, do you need a meaning to live? And the answer is no. No. Your lungs are perfectly fine with taking one breath at a time. And they don't ask themselves, what's the meaning to breathing? I'm going to be dead in 100 years anyway. What's waste of energy to breathe, or the heart? Well, why would I pump all this blood through this body if it's going to die anyway? The heart doesn't need a meaning for beating. For some reason, our brain always thinks it needs a meaning to do things. 人生の意味の簡単な答えは意味がないということですね。どうせ私たちは死に、配偶者も死に、子供も孫も死ぬ、人類も死んで、この惑星もいずれ消える。だから、人類のため、環境保護のため、いくら頑張ってノーベル平和賞をもらったとしても最終的には意味がない。だから佐々木老師もよく言うけれども、生まれる前に降ろされたって中絶されたって誰も気づいてなかったんだろうし、それで世が変わったはずもない。じゃあ自殺はどうか。これは内山老師が今年ですか、今年再販されて禅からのアドバイスという、本の中にも書いてますけれども、今の地球上の人口を考えたら、70億人今住んでますけれども、日本こそ少子化で人口減ってますけれども、地球というレベルで考えると人口が非常に多い。だから自殺したって全然変わらない。むしろ人口が助かる。地球人類はむしろそれで助かるから。本当に死にたければ死んだらいいんだけれども、本当に死にたいかどうか。頭の中でそう考えているだけじゃないか。本当に死にたいならば呼吸を今ここでやめればいい。呼吸を10分15分止めたらもうそれで死ねるはずなのに、かつて何年前まで日本で毎年3万人の人が自殺したけれども、呼吸を止めて自殺したという話はなぜか聞いたことない。なぜ呼吸を止めて死ねないかというと、頭 は死にたいと思っても首より下は死にたくない。人生の意味はないけれども、首より下は別に意味というものを必要としてない。意味を必要としているのは、意味が知りたい。意味がなくては困ると思っているのは、頭くらい。だけれども、じゃなくたっていいじゃないか。内山老師の表現で言えば、この頭を手放しにしたら別に人生の意味なんてなくたっていい。意味があるからこそ生きるんではない。生きることに意味はないんだけれども、特になくたっていい。A little bit more complicated answer would be the answer that there is no meaning to life, but you can give meaning to your life. That answer is, for example, you can find it among others in the books of Viktor Frankl. The most famous in English one is called Man's Search for Meaning. In German, what is it in German? Und trotzdem Ja zum Leben sagen, which is a little bit strange title for the book because, well, in English that would be and still saying yes to life. But that is not the original title of this book that I'm talking about, but it's the title of a lecture that Frankl gave later in his life. But the lecture itself is not part of the book, so it's strange that they would use the title of a lecture for a book that has quite different content. Either way, in Japanese the title would be Yoru Tokiri, which means night and fog. That's his most famous work, in which Frankl, who was a Jew who lived in Austria during the Nazi time, describes his experiences in concentration camps, which he survived, but the rest of his family was killed. And he originally was and later became again a psychiatrist. And he started something which is called logotherapy. So basically therapy through meaning. Logo means meaning. Logos means meaning. So he tried to help people find meaning in life, and by finding he means not that there is already a meaning and you just have to look for it to find it, but basically one famous thing that Frankl says is you shouldn't ask life for its meaning, but it's life that is asking you for the meaning. You're the one who has to give meaning to life. It's not that you sit here and say, well, what's the meaning to life? And if there's no meaning, why do I live? Why don't I kill myself? It's basically life is giving you this question, what's the meaning to your life? That connects to this question about kind of adult practice. The childish attitude would be to expect somebody to give you meaning in your life. And if there's no meaning, well, why should I live in the first place? The adult point of view would be, well, if there's no meaning to life, maybe I can still try to live a meaningful way of life. And Frankl said, well, there's three examples how you could give meaning to your life. One would be to create something, for example, a piece of art, a piece of music, to write a novel, or to maybe just have a garden in the back of your house or something like that. It doesn't really have to be something big. You create something, and sometimes when you create something, you feel that gives meaning to your life. It makes you feel that something meaningful is happening there when you create something. But of course, not everybody is an artist like Picasso. Some people, they have something like that in them, others have not. And then Frankl says, well, another thing you can do is, for example, experience and enjoy, for example, works of art or music or landscape. You go into nature, or you travel around the world and just see things and see beautiful things, or maybe you're a gourmet and you love to eat delicious things, and that makes you feel at the end of the day, if you ate something that was good, it makes you think that this day was meaningful because you discovered a new taste. You ate something delicious. That would be also a way to give meaning to your life, by just discover, experience, enjoy things in life. And the third thing is that sometimes you can't even do that. For example, in Frankl's case, when he was in the concentration camp, enjoying life or delicious food or traveling around the world, that was just not an option. Creating artworks was not an option. For him, every day in the concentration camp was just suffering. And it could be the same when, for example, you're diagnosed with terminal cancer and you're hospitalized and you're already lying on the bed and you don't know when you're going to die, but you're basically only suffering and waiting for the day for you to die. And even just experiencing or enjoying life is not an option anymore. In that case, Frankl says suffering itself can be a way to give meaning to your life, which sounds a little bit, well, paradoxical maybe to some, but he say if you just take this suffering at face value and, well, I would put it like this, if you don't suffer here, right now, in this moment, if you don't accept that suffering and live that suffering, nobody can do it for you. So you take that suffering and, well, it's not that you have to enjoy it, but you taste it. You taste the whole flavor of this suffering. And even that can give meaning to your life. But if you're a really nihilistic person, probably you could still counter this approach by saying, well, but for example, creating artwork, what's the meaning of creating artwork? What's the meaning of creating pieces of music? What's the meaning of giving your life a meaning? What's the meaning of enjoying this day if maybe tomorrow I'm dead? So I think this approach by Frankl requires our willingness to actually, how do you say, choose life. So this giving life a meaning, it doesn't create a meaning that would survive the first challenge. Like, for example, money doesn't have a meaning because when you're dead, you can't take your money with you. Sex doesn't have a meaning because when you're dead, nobody asked you how many girls you slept with. But I mean, the same you could say about artworks. When you're dead, nobody asks how much artworks you create. Nobody asks how delicious foods you ate or how many countries you traveled to. Nobody even asks you how much suffering you took upon you. It only works in that moment when you, well, accept that, well, I can live this day or I don't live this day. And giving meaning to your life in this second sense, the more complicated sense, basically means that you accept this one day and you try to make the best out of it. Not because it has a meaning, but you accept it and you try to make the best out of it, live it to the full. And that is what Frankl would say, creating meaning, giving meaning to that one day. で、人生に意味はないんだけれども、ビクトー・フランクルという人がいます。日本では特に夜と霧という本で有名です。それでも人生にイエスという別の本もありますけれども、このフランクによると、人生にあらかじめ意味というものが用意されたのではなくて、むしろ私たちが人生に意味を与えなければいけない。自分の人生に意味を与えない限りは、人生には本当に意味がない。だから人生に向かって、その意味は何ですかと問うべきではなく、むしろ私が人生に問われている。お前の生き方にどんな意味があるかと、人生の方から問われているのは自分だというのは、フランクルの主張です。で、自分の人生に意味が与えるには、例えば3つがあるとフランクが言います。1つは、想像すること。芸術作品とか音楽だとか、料理もそうだし、禅ガーデンのようなところを想像したり、それに意味を見出す人もいる。そういう能力とか趣味がない人は自分では想像できないけれども、人が想像したものを楽しむことができる。おいしいものを食べることもそうだし、きれいな音楽を聴く、美しい作品を見る、あるいはきれいな景色を見る、旅をする。それも人生に意味を与える一つの方法。ところが、フランクという人は、ユダヤ人でオーストラリアに生まれて、ナチスドイツの時に精神科医をやった人ですけれども、ナチスドイツの時に強制収容所に入れられて、確かにアウシュビッツも一時期行ってたと思いますけれども、結局生き延びたけれども、残りの家族は全部殺されてしまったんですね。で、この頃はもちろん想像する活動は全くできないし、人が想像したものを楽しむということも全くない。一日一日ただ苦痛に耐えるだけだったと思うんですけれども、今だったら、例えば末期がんでもういつ死ぬかわからない、もう入院して薬を投入されるけれども、やはり毎日毎日が苦しい。痛みに耐えて死ぬのを待つだけという人もいる。そういう人にどういう生きる意味はあるんだろうというと、フランクが言うには、苦しむことによって、この苦しみをそのまま受け入れることによって自分の人生に意味を与えることができると。極端な場合は苦しみそのもの、この苦しみをそのまま受け入れるという生き方によって意味を見出すこともできる。それこそそれでも人生にイエスという態度ですね。それでも人生にイエスという、別にイエスと言わなければいけないという理由は一つもない。生まれた意味もなければ死ぬまでの78年、90年の時間に意味がないんだから、ノーと言ったっていいし、自殺して言ったっていいけれども、それをしないんだったら、イエスと言わなければ、それこそ意味のない生き方になってしまうんですね。生きるならば、それこそイエス。そしてそれは楽しい部分だけにイエスを言うんではなくて、苦しいところにもイエスと言わなければ、苦しい日、雨の日、辛い日、鬱の日に意味がなくなってしまう。でもそういう日もそのまま受け入れる。それによって meaning of life を見つけることができるかもしれない。Then there was this question about quitting the game. ゲームを降りることについて。That's an expression that I've been using more often recently. What does it mean to quit the game? What do I mean with the game in the first place? I'm not an expert in psychology, but when kids around 1 year old, they say the first kind of words, but you can't really call it speaking yet. But then when they get 2 years old, 3 years old, they learn to speak, and they need some time until they learn, well, who they are. Interestingly, at first, when kids learn to speak, they don't know how to use the words I and you. So first, when they refer to themselves, they use their name, the name that has been given to them by their parents. For some reason, I don't know what the reason could be, but for some reason in Japan, kids much longer keep that habit of referring to themselves as, for example, Taro, if their name is Taro. They call themselves Taro for a longer time than in the West. In the West, also kids, if this name is John, for example, he would call himself John, but then he learns quicker to refer to himself as I. Why in Japan, sometimes it's the parents who try to motivate the kids to refer to himself with the first pronoun, singular, by, for example, calling a kids, male persons in Japan often say boku when they say I. For some reasons, females don't use that word. But boys, and also often grown-up men, when they refer to themselves, they say boku. So the parents call their boy boku, although that's absurd because boku means me, but to motivate the kid to say boku, they say boku. But then anyway, at one point you learn that when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, you learn to say, for example, in Japan, the girls would say watashi, the boys would say boku. In the West we say I and you. And at that point, you're already part of the game. And nobody probably really remembers what happens before you're able to speak. At least I don't have any memories from when I was 2 years old. Sometimes there's people who claim that they remember when they were born or when they were still in their mother's belly or past lives or stuff like that. I don't know if that's really true, but probably for most of us, we only have memories since after we learn to speak, because, well, memory probably consists of either language or of images or other stuff, but your mind needs to become able to form concepts, make pictures, or to use another metaphor except for game, like you map reality. You need to be able to picture a map of reality and also locate yourself on that map. So basically becoming able to speak means you make a picture of reality, a map of reality, and also you know where you are on that map. So you can say I, you know who is at the center of the map. So that's first of all the kind of the basic requirement for becoming part of the game. You need to be able to make that map, and all of us become able to do that at a very young age. And probably in the beginning it's a shock when you realize you're not the only player in that game, but there's other players. Until then, whenever you cry, your mother gives you milk, and or she changes diapers. So during the first year or so, probably there's no distinction between yourself and others, and you can hardly move your body and your hands. You can't really use them at your will, and your feet. But when you are hungry and you cry, your mother comes. So it's probably you have the illusion that actually the mother is part of yourself, even more than these hands and feet maybe. But at one point, and that must come as a shock, you realize actually my mother is also just a human being, and she's sometimes tired, she's sometimes angry, and then maybe you have other brothers and sisters, and you realize actually I'm only a part of this game, a small part of this game, and the other players, for them it's actually not about me. Like, until then, you thought the whole game is about you, but then you realize, actually, I'm only one of many players, and for the others, it's not about me. In the end, everybody is most concerned about themselves. And well, the parents are also concerned about their children, but that's also, well, why is that? In part, it's also because you think about the children as an extension of yourself, and you hope that they might realize all the dreams that you didn't realize. So it's not really unconditional love in most cases. When parents love their children, they do love them, but it's not so unconditional. And when you realize that, also that comes as a shock, that my parents didn't really love me for what I am, but more for what they wanted me to be, what they hope I will grow into. But maybe I don't really want to grow into that. I don't want to be that, what they want me to be. So playing the game basically means you learn that you need to do your homework to get pocket money, and you want pocket money to buy sweets and pocket books and games and stuff like that. You learn how to, play the game to get that. And you learn also that there's other players, and you need to respect these other players to a certain degree so that they help you to win as well. But basically, in the end, at the end of the day, it's only about the points that you gain. You want to gain points. You want to win the game. You want to make the high score if possible. And later in life, you always compare yourself with the others. How am I at school compared to the others? How am I with the girls compared to the others? I'm driving a BMW. What are the others driving? I'm living in this house. What are the others? That's basically the game. And the reason why I'm talking about quitting the game is because when you play the game, you forget something. One thing, and that has also to do with the meaning of life, the game is going to be over in 100 years, probably earlier. What do you do with your high score? What do you do with all these points that you made? And another thing that you forget is this day that you're living today. You can't compare it to the day others live. Or 1 hour of Zazen. When it comes to the posture, you can compare your posture to your neighbor's posture, or you can maybe compare how often you sleep during Zazen to the neighbor, and you maybe feel good. Well, I'm not moving as much as Ifan, I'm better than Ifan, for example. But what actually happens during this 1 hour, this reality of 1 hour, how do you compare that to anything? I mean, there's no comparison possible. The reality of your life cannot be compared to anything. So, for example, there was the map metaphor. You're living inside the map and you locate yourself in the map when in reality, of course, the map is here. For if I had, well, I have a map, for example, on my iPad. I have Google Maps on my iPad, and I could, on Google Maps, see where I am on the map. I'm in Antaiji. Antaiji is in Hyogo Prefecture. Hyogo Prefecture is in Japan, and Japan is on the planet Earth. So is this where I am? No. I am here, and the map is part of the reality here. But that's what we forget when we play the game. We start to locate ourselves on a map that we created in reality, and we forget the reality that we have to be in to make a map out of it. And at one point we start to see the map only. We see the game only, and we only keep track of our score, and that's the only thing we're worried about. Or another very popular metaphor would be the movie. And originally you were everything in that movie, but then you realize, well, I'm seeing the world through the eyes of the main actor. I'm the main actor in this movie. And rather than enjoying the whole movie, you try to be better than the other actors. You think it's only about what happens to the main actor. You're living, at one point you live inside the movie and you forget completely about the whole screen that you were before. You identified with the main actor. In the case of the map, you forget the reality that the map is made of. And you think that you is something that you can find on the map when you originally were the reality. You were not separate from the reality that you needed for creating the map. So that's what I mean by quitting the game. And in Uchiyama Roshi's books, it would be, well, these two meanings of self. One is the self that is 1 out of 7 billion people on this planet, and the other self is, well, everything that happens in this moment. And playing the game means to identify only with this one player that is 1 out of 7 billion. Quitting the game means to wake up that, well, actually, everything that's happening right now is me, and there's no comparison, because how do I compare this to anything else? Practice in daily life is connected to quitting the game because, and also connected to the next question, what does it mean to be a monk? In daily life, we have to play the game to a certain degree. Otherwise, we couldn't survive. We need money, we need a house to live in, we need food to eat. It's not that you need a family and you need kids, but maybe you want to have a family and kids. And if you have a family, then you need to support the family. So practicing in daily life, especially when you're not a monk, but a layperson, in a way contradicts quitting the game. You cannot 100% quit the game. If you have a job, you have to, well, compete with others. You want to make a career. Quitting the game might not really be an option there. So maybe first I go to this question, what does it mean to be a monk? Well, the reason why people choose monkhood, I think, is because it makes it much easier to quit the game, at least for some time. Like here in Antaiji, you paid to participate in the retreat, but if you come long term, you don't have to pay. So you don't need any money. That aspect, which is a big aspect, big part of playing the game, is gone. So at the end of the month, there are no bills to pay. You don't have to file any tax-paying documents at the end of the year. You just sign a paper that says no income, and that's it. You pay no taxes as a monk. 1,008 hours during the year you just sit. And sitting is basically the perfect example of quitting the game, because what is this Zazen good for? It's good for nothing. And that's why we do it. Because it's the most radical example of not participating in the game. We're not even practicing mindfulness in the hope that it helps us later when we get back to so-called real life. We don't hope that we might have good ideas coming up during meditation and that we can make money out of those ideas later. We don't hope that it might extend our life expectancy. 1 hour of Zazen is just 1 hour of just sitting, quitting the game. And becoming a monk enables you to do that. At least here in Antaiji, you can do that. Although also in Antaiji, it's not the whole story. So Antaiji also has a daily life. And there's also this aspect, for example, we have this electric fence and it needs to be checked daily. And what you check there is basically sometimes in the wind and rain, it happens that these electric wires move a little bit and they start to touch the poles of the fence, and then the electricity escapes from there. The voltage goes down and the electric fence doesn't work anymore, doesn't keep the deer and the boars out. So somebody has to check the fence and they have to take a good look at the wires and make sure that they, see if there's a problem. Or sometimes you check the voltage and you realize for some reason in some part there's low voltage. And you have to think about why. Why could it be that there's low voltage? You have to find the reason why the voltage is low on certain days. And if you remember that Zen practice is supposed to be quitting the game, you could say, well, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to do that? Is it really so important? Why don't we use this time to do Zazen? The answer why it's important is because we try to be self-sufficient. If the deer or boars get into the vegetable fields, we have nothing to eat in the autumn and during the winter. But again, you could say, well, is that really so important? If the deer and the boar get into the garden, the vegetable garden, good for them. They're also hungry. And if we have nothing to eat, we can go to town and back, and people will give us something. It will be enough to survive. Isn't it about getting out of this game of gaining? I want the potatoes for myself. I don't want the boars to eat the potatoes. Isn't that also playing the game? And in a way, you could say, yes, it's also playing the game to a certain degree. So in Antaiji, there's these two sides, 1,800 hours of just doing nothing and just sitting and stopping the game. And if we wanted to, we could do a lot of more productive things during that time. If we wanted to be professional farmers and sell food stuff, we maybe could be successful if we worked from 4 in the morning until 8 at night, using this Zazen time in a more productive way. But we don't. But then when we work, we try to do what's necessary to do. So actually being a monk doesn't mean that you quit the game 100%, but you're still part of the game. You try to be serious about what you do, which in Antaiji means you try to grow your own rice, your own vegetables. We fell trees and chop those so that we have hot bath, hot shower. But it's not about competition. So at the end of the day, it's not about who worked most. It's not about who's the best cook, who chopped the most wood, and who chopped the most wood. He's allowed to have one side dish more than the others. We don't play the game in that way. It's also not that you make a career as a monk faster if you're better than the others. And so to me, being a monk doesn't mean that you quit the game completely, but you play it in a little different way. It's not about you, it's not about your points, but you try to cooperate with the others in the game. And if you have an environment like Antaiji, it's more easy than in so-called real life, in real society. But practice in daily life with others, I think what you can and should aim at in what you can and should aim at in life and society is basically the same. Change the game just as much as you can. Like, for example, you play Monopoly with your kids, and the aim of Monopoly is to be the richest man at the end of the game. If you play with your kids and you know the rules of Monopoly well and they don't, they might be quite easy for you to win each time. So is it the aim and the meaning of Monopoly to win each time against your kids? Obviously not. The same with chess or Go or whatever game. When you play with your kids, you want them to have fun as well. You want them to discover the fun of playing the game. If they don't, they won't play with you anymore, and it's no fun for you either. So when you play, most of the time it's not really about the points you make and if you win at the end or not. It's about the fun that all sides have and the amount that all sides can enjoy that game. So sometimes you will maybe even consciously choose to lose that game to allow the others to have more fun at the game. But then when your kids grow and maybe they have smaller siblings, you probably will also hope that they won't always try to win. Once they discover the joy of winning the game and being part of the game, at first you help them to learn that. Oh, that's really, it's fun and it's a joy to win this game. At first it's hard, especially with something difficult like chess. But then, first time they win against daddy and they're really proud. Wow, I won against daddy. But then they play with their small brother or with their small sister and you try to teach them another step, which means now you know how to win, but also now teach your smaller sister, your smaller brother, the joy of playing the game. It's actually not about winning. In the first place, it's about having fun together. And living our lives in that way, in daily life, is very difficult but not impossible. And that's what in Buddhism is called the life of a bodhisattva. And usually the first step is said to be giving. Usually what we are thinking about in our lives first is what can I get? How much can I take? How much will people give me? And as a bodhisattva, we change that rule and say, why don't I give? I can give. Sometimes when I have a fight with my wife at night and then the next morning the fight is already over, we can hardly remember what we were fighting about, but then sometimes it's about who's gonna say good morning first. Because somehow you still think I was right, she was wrong. I don't even remember what the fight was about, but she owes me an apology. And probably she thinks the same way. So we're both waiting for who's going to say good morning first. You don't even have to apologize. I just want you to say good morning first. And that's also, I mean, that's the game of the stupid person, a stupid person's game. But, well, even I, after 30 years of Zazen, I'm still part of that game. And quitting the game means you just say good morning. You just say good morning. It's as easy as that. And in Antaiji it's easy because Myogen-san is going to be this month the guy who says good morning and you just have to answer. It's really easy in an environment like this. But if you're married and you sometimes have a fight with your spouse, even that can be difficult, but there's an opportunity to play the bodhisattva. Even though you think you were right and the other person owes you an apology, you say, good morning, how are you? It's as easy as that, practice in daily life. But, well, in theory, and in practice, often it's not so easy. What does it mean to be a monk? I try to answer that. Being a monk makes it just a little bit easier to play the game with different rules because, well, it's Antaiji. Living at Antaiji is like playing Monopoly among kids. The rules are just a little bit easier. No money involved. There's a futon for you, and if you don't have clothes, there's stuff in the futon beer. We have rubber boots for people who come here. Although the last couple of years we've become more strict. Like when I first became the abbot here, people could come anytime they wanted. There was no age restriction. My first couple of students, they were all older than me. My first student was 69-year-old when he ordained here as a monk, and at sometimes I was the youngest when I became the abbot. It was 33, and sometimes I was the youngest among the residents. Everybody else was older than me. A lot of people didn't speak any Japanese when they came. And also there was no commitment required. Now we say you should commit for 3 years when you come, or at least seriously think about staying for 3 years. In the beginning you could stay for 2 days or 2 months or 2 years, just as you wanted, as you chose, as you felt. And when people came, they didn't have to pay either, so no money. If you wanted to donate, you were welcome to donate, but you didn't have to pay. Which meant that, well, sometimes people showed up unannounced on the doorstep. They had maybe heard from somebody, or there's displayed Antaiji, you don't have to pay, so if you run out of money, you can go there, backpackers. Maybe they had 2 more months until their flight goes to India, so they had to somehow survive for 2 months in Japan. It's an expensive country, so, in Antaiji I get this vegetarian food, and it's in nature, it's a beautiful place. They even have Wi-Fi connection. And at the time, it's basically also part of kind of playing the game with different rules. When these people come, okay, here's your futon, and here's how we eat the meals, and a bath time is at this time, and please help us with this work. And if then after a week or 2 weeks they said, okay, thank you for all, and they left, and sometimes they even leave with their room a complete mess, and the sheets are dirty, and they don't wash their working clothes, then, well, okay, we do that. We wash the rooms, and we clean the rooms, and we prepare for the next person. But the reason why I'm not now stricter is just like you teach your kids to have fun at the game by sometimes losing, but then you also want your kid to get to that point. So if you really want others also to become bodhisattvas, you have to also communicate. Well, it takes a certain commitment, and you also have to do something. For example, also language requirements. You do not have to speak Japanese to study Zen, but if you're living in a community like this, you have to be able to communicate with the others. That has to be some language. Could be Japanese, could be English, could be German. But if it's in Japan, then there will always be a high percentage of Japanese here. There will be visitors coming from the village. They speak no English. There will be telephone calls, and the people who call here, they expect somebody who speaks Japanese to answer. So it would be kind of selfish if people come here and say, well, I speak English well. If you want to communicate with them, English is the world language. Why don't you speak English with me? What happens if you're in the kitchen and the telephone rings and you're the one who needs to answer the telephone? So the last couple of years we've become more strict, but in my mind that's just like teaching a kid when they're 10 years old that they should also be able to take care of others when they play with somebody who's still 5 years old. Now you need to lose, and you have to, it's not about you anymore. You need to be able to lose you. So basically what a bodhisattva tries to do is you try to help others, but what do you try to help them? You try to help others to become bodhisattvas as well. That's basically the aim. You don't want to help eternally, always just feeding the hungry and giving clothes to the cold ones. You also try to do that, but the hope is that they then realize, wow, there's somebody playing with completely different rules. There's somebody who's quit the game, and maybe I could do the same. At first they think, oh, that guy must be foolish. He's giving away his points. He's giving away his money. Let me get that money. Let me get those points. Let me take advantage of that person. But the hope always is that at one point, the people around you realize, oh, maybe there's a deeper reason to that. And they discover that, oh, I've been absorbed in this game for half of my life. But if that guy was able to quit it, maybe I can quit it. What does it mean to be a monk? So basically, in my mind, it's somebody who has quit the game, but then participates again, but he plays according to different rules. So it's not that you excuse yourself from the game and say, I don't partake in this game anymore. But rather, you play the game, but you play it in a different way, in the hope that it's more fun for everybody involved. What to do about judging? How can you practice as an adult? How to do about judging? Like in my metaphor that I always use, the metaphor of the meadow during Zazen. During Zazen, you realize that on the meadow of your mind there's so many sheep. There's black ones, white ones. You try to separate them. That's judging. The shepherd is judging. You decide that the sheep are not supposed to be in the vegetable garden, so you build a fence around the sheep and make sure that they don't get out of the fence. That's also the shepherd who's doing his judging and is trying to exert control there. And what I told you, don't identify with the shepherd. Don't be the shepherd, try to be the sky first. Be like the sky that spreads above the meadow. And you see what's happening on the meadow, but you don't judge. You don't control. That doesn't mean that you have to erase the shepherd. So when you become able to be the sky, the shepherd is still there. The shepherd is still down there. So you even allow the shepherd to play his game. You allow the sheep to be there. You even accept the shepherd. So if you use the word judging here, you don't judge the judging. You don't say judging is a bad thing, so now I need to stop judging. If you do that, you're judging again. You realize I'm judging, and you don't judge the judging. You don't say judging is a bad thing. But if you become able to just see that it's happening, and that is really not based on much anything. Basically, when you're judging, you're on the map, but the map is not connected with reality, or it's only loosely connected. When you realize that the judging loses its kind of power supply, if you really engage positively in the judging, then you're supplying it with more energy, and it never stops. And even when you say judging is a bad thing, you're doing even more, you're still doing more judging. So you don't stop the judging. But if you just see the judging for what it is, then just with the sheep becoming quieter over time, I think you get free from judging. You see other people judging a lot, you even witness that it's happening in yourself. And you don't even say that's a bad thing or that's a stupid thing. You just see that's the way it is. That's the way it is, but reality cannot be forced into that frame of judging, like the sheep cannot be forced into that fence that the shepherd builds. And even if you think you finally separated the black ones from the white ones, you will always find a couple of gray ones, and you're not quite sure, are these white ones, are these black ones? And when you're still thinking about it, behind your back, the black ones and the white ones have mingled again. So it's never going to stop. So first thing to stop is stop the judging. Stop the judging. And when it happens, don't engage in it. How can you practice as an adult? Practicing as an adult, 大人としての修行ですね、は、結局、自分の人生であるという、気づきから出発しないといけないと思いますね。たとえ親でも配偶者でも子供でも自分の代わりにはなれない。あるいはさっきここ言ったように、こういうみんなが励んでいるようなところに来たら自分も少し頑張れるようになるんじゃないかと。今、安泰寺でタバコを吸っている人はいないと思うし、社会全体としてももう吸う人は少なくなっているけれども、10年前、20年前は結構それ議論になってた。安泰寺でタバコを吸っていいか吸ってはいけないのか、吸っていいならどこで吸っていいのか。で、私は吸ったことが一度もないので、どっちでもいいんだけれども、いや、安泰寺で吸っちゃいけないという人は大体吸いたいんだけれども、吸う人がいたら自分も吸っちゃうから、やめたいから人にも全部やめてほしいという。 でも周りがみんなやめたとしても、まあその時やめれたとしても、ここ一歩出れたら元の木阿弥だからあまり意味がない。だから最終的にはお前が吸いたいなら吸ったらいいし、やめたければやめたらいいという。やめるならもう自分がやめるしかしょうがない。頑張りたいんだったらもう自分が頑張るしかしょうがないし、頑張らなくてもいいやと思ったら頑張らなければいいんだけれども、まず人に頑張ってもらって自分はその後をついていこうという、甘えた考え方は、通用しないということを本当に実感する。この今日というたった一日だって、周りの人は何をしようが、あるいは一中の座禅もそうですけれども、いくら周りの人が頑張って座禅したって、それは自分の座禅に絶対なり得ない。そしてもう70、80で終わってしまう人生だけじゃなくて、この一日だって絶対に戻ってこない一日。明日10回座ります。おそらく途中から早く終わればいいのに、早く終わってくれないかと思うかもしれないけれども、終わってしまえば、この10中の座禅は絶対戻ってこないし、そのうちの1回の座禅ももう1回やり直しさせてくれと思ったって絶対にやり直しが効かない。だからそれを自分でもう本当に最善に生かすか殺すか、全部自分一人にかかっているということ。もちろんその修行道場だったら修行仲間の価値もこれはすごい価値ですし、同志という要するに同じ志を持ったものはすごく価値のあるものなんだけれども、最終的はもう自分一人で行くしかしょうがない。お釈迦様だってよりどころは自分だけで一人で歩め、才能角のごとし一人で歩めというわけですね。この仏道の場合だって同じです。最初は入門したら良き先輩、良き仲間がいるとすごい力になるんだけれども、安泰寺もそうだし、大体どこのもそうだけど、5年もいればもう自分一人、もう同業者いなくなってしまう。おそらく永平寺ですらもう5年もいればもう同業者がみんなどこか行ってしまって、でその時も自分の足で自分が歩まなければいけないし、それはもう哲学の世界だってどこの世界でもそうだし、哲学で周りにすごく深く考えている人がいれば自分も深く考えられるようにはならないし、グループ作業じゃない仏道修行もサンガ僧侶はすごく大事なんだけれども、結局自分の道を自分の足で自分が歩む。やらなければ損するのは自分。別に先祖様に申し訳ないとか、親に申し訳ないとか、そんな考えなくてもいい。ただ自分自身に申し訳ないと思わなければいけないんですね。How to deal with pain. So that's a question that you will find yourself confronted with tomorrow. I already said in the afternoon, we will be sitting 10 times. The first is 1 hour from 4 to 5, and then there's 15 minutes Kinhin, followed by 45 minutes of Zazen, and there's going to be 10 periods of Zazen. From the time the bell strikes at the beginning of Zazen until the end of Zazen, don't move. If you feel an itch, don't scratch yourself. If the glasses on your nose feel uncomfortable, let them sit on your nose. But probably bigger problem than that are the pain in the knees and in the ankles and maybe in your back and shoulders as well. What do you do with that pain? You're not supposed to move. Well, one thing you can do, and I already told you that, if you know you can't sit in full lotus for 45 minutes, don't start in full lotus. If you know you can't sit in half lotus either for 45 minutes, don't sit in half lotus. If you can't sit in the Burmese position either, but you need a bench, you can use a bench, you can use a cushion under your buttock. Some people have also used chairs. That's also possible to sit on a chair. But, and I've been seeing that a number of times, sometimes people decide to sit on a chair and after 15 minutes they start to move on the chair because they're in pain. People are miserable and in pain even on a chair. I don't know, we never tried that, but we could try putting out a futon and allow them to lie on the futon. I could imagine that after half an hour you start to feel pain on your back and your shoulders lying on the futon, and you start to move around on the futon. So with pain, there's, well, two aspects. One is the physical aspect, and the other is the psychological aspect. And often when you're in the pain, you can't tell the one from the other. You just feel pain. But a huge part is psychological. And if you know, I can sit in Burmese, for example, for 45 minutes without it killing me, you will still experience pain, but then you can let go of the whole rest of the pain, which is psychological pain. And there still might be pain, but it's not so bad. It doesn't kill you, even though maybe at one point it feels like killing you. I mean, that's the story I always tell. Usually I say 5-day session, on the 3rd day it feels like you're dying, and tomorrow it's going to be 10 hours. But maybe even during the 10 hours, after the 3rd or 4th hour of Zazen, you feel like this is killing me. And at one point I asked my teacher, there's this invisible wall during session that doesn't let me through. At one point it feels like I'm dying. What can I do? And my teacher said, what are you worried about? We have a graveyard behind the Zazen hall, and if you die, we can bury you there. It's really not a problem. It's not a problem for us here at Antaiji if you die. And even though I told you that I was thinking a lot about suicide when I was young, before I came to Antaiji, once you're in this situation that, oh, I'm in pain, this is killing me, it's killing me, it's killing me, you don't want to die. You realize you don't want to die. So what you do usually is, for example, if you're sitting somewhere close to Myogen, maybe you can take a peek on the watch and it's 5 minutes, 5 more minutes, I can grind my teeth and do that, for example. So if you know the time, or maybe some people bring their clock, actually that's not a good idea. If possible, don't bring your clock. But if you bring your clock and then you take a look at the clock, 5 more minutes. Maybe you start to count your breath. Okay, 1, 2, and you count at the teller. 3 more minutes. 2 more minutes. So you do this, kind of, you don't want to move if the others are also not moving, so I don't want to be the first to move, and you grind your teeth, you count the time, and then when the bell rings, it's over. But then you realize 15 minutes later, oh, I have to sit another round of Zazen. But it works maybe in the beginning, so there's this fighting attitude. I fight myself through the pain. And sometimes it can even get you through the whole 10 hours if you're lucky. But with a lot of people, they reach their limit after a time, or you take a look at Myogen's clock and you see, oh, it's still 30 minutes. How can I sit with this pain for another 30 minutes? 3 minutes. You thought it's 3 minutes and you see it's 30. It must be something wrong with the clock. Maybe the batteries are dead or whatever. But yeah, a couple of minutes later, you see it's still 29 minutes, 28 minutes. Can't be true. How can I survive this? So you somehow, without anybody noticing, you kind of go a little bit like this and try to get the knees a little bit up. And sometimes it helps for a while when you sit like this. And then when this hurts as well, you go a little bit forward again. If you thought you could sit in half lotus, but you realize you can't do it in half lotus, you move a little bit here and try to get into quarter lotus. In quarter lotus, often your ankles start to hurt even more. So somehow you try to sneak yourself through. You don't fight anymore, but now you try to escape just so that nobody notices, and to try to escape. And when you fought yourself through Zazen, at the end you say, wow, I did it, wow, I did it. And when you try to escape, in the end you feel not so good about yourself, but at least you survived. Usually these are the two approaches that we take first. First you try to fight, and then next you try to flight. And the art of Zazen means to take none of these two approaches. So don't fight. It's not about fighting through Zazen, through the pain. You don't fight with the pain, but also you don't try to escape from the pain. But it's not that you learn to enjoy the pain, but, you accept the pain. You let the pain be. And if you learn to take the position of the sky, and you realize I'm the sky, I'm not the shepherd, you might even have this feeling that there's the pain, but it's not my pain. I'm not the owner of the pain. So there's a pain there, but I don't suffer because there is nobody to suffer there. Might take some time to have this realization, but when you look at the pain only without, judging, for example, without judging the pain and saying this is something bad for me, I need to avoid this, but you just allow this pain to be. And it's necessary, it's important for that you know how you can sit for 45 minutes. So if you do that sitting in full lotus when you can't sit for 45 minutes in full lotus, you can do damage to your body. So by now probably you know if you can sit for 45 minutes in full lotus or half lotus or in Burmese. But if you know I can do that in Burmese, it's still painful, but it doesn't kill me. And then you allow the pain to just be. And even psychologically, when it feels like dying, and then you say, okay, then let me die here, and let's hope that Muro's gonna bury me in the grave next to Sawaki Roshi and Uchiyama Roshi. Then you might realize, oh, it's actually easy. Because the moment you thought you were dying, you lose this perspective of I'm suffering, I need to do something about it. There might still be pain, but you don't do anything about it. You don't have to fight against it. You don't have to run away from it. And you realize, I'm still sitting here. Wow. After all, I'm still sitting here. And my knees hurt, and the ankles hurt, and the back hurts, but I'm still sitting here. So the less fighting you do and the less escaping you try to do, the easier it gets. Because by fighting and by trying to escape, you're basically multiplying the psychological part of the pain. Up to the point where you really think, I'm dying, it's killing me. When you're sitting on a soft cushion and you're protected from the rain and the wind and the tenzo is cooking for you while you're sitting there and you say, I'm dying, I'm in hell. And everything is actually taken care of. And once you let go, you realize, oh, actually I was quite over the top when I said I'm dying. How to teach those who are not interested in Buddhism? Well, the question is, of course, what do we want to teach them? There's no reason to teach anybody Buddhism who's not interested in Buddhism. But, I mean, what we try to teach is not Buddhism. What we try to teach others, that it's only a game. And it's possible to quit the game. It's possible to play the game with different rules. That's, of course, very difficult when you try to teach it to people who are so absorbed in the game that they still think it's only about the points I can make. And when people have a more easy approach to the game, then some people try to take advantage of that. If there's somebody who's not thinking about winning all the time, well, then let me take his points. In that case, it can be actually quite difficult to communicate that. You have to decide by yourself, well, to what degree do I play the game then as if I would play with my 3-year-old kids, and I just allow them to win and I allow them to cheat. And when they lose and they cry and they throw the game all over the place, then I say, okay, let's start again and I give you an advantage. But probably you don't want to play that game all the time. You don't want to allow the others to play the role of the 3-year-old all the time. That's the reason why I, couple of years ago at Antaiji, became a little bit tired of all the travelers who just came here because they could get a free ride. In the summer it was nice, and then when it got colder in the winter, everybody was going to India and Thailand to smoke marijuana, and then they came back in the spring maybe. You do that for a while, but also you can get tired of that. So, well, you have to be inventive, teaching people. You don't have to teach people Buddhism, but you might try to open their eyes that they're actually caught on a map when they don't see reality anymore. They've completely lost track of reality because they only move on the map in their minds. Helping people take a step back from the game. Often in life, it's things like sickness or case of death of a close one that teaches us that in a natural way. Oh, this game has an end. And the way I played this game is pretty senseless when I think about the fact that it's going to end. Can you make others happy through your practice? この修行によって、このプラクティスによって人を幸せにできるかということですね。これも以前この前のやつとつながってはいるんですけれども、幸せとは何かにもよりますけれども、最終的にはこのゲームを一旦降りて、また違うルールでこのゲームを遊ぶことによってこのゲームをもっと楽しくするというのは目的ですね。自分だけ勝つんじゃなくて、みんなで菩薩という新しいルールでやったらもっと楽しくなるぞ。 ですから、内山老師がおそらく毎回毎回接しに来てた人、その頃の京都の安泰寺には、日曜日に一日接心があったと思いますけれども、月曜日から土曜日までは会社員として忙しく働いて、日曜日は家族を置いて毎回毎回、座禅修行に来てた人に、その人が内山老師に自分はもう何年も座っているけれども自分の修行が果たして進んでいるか進んでないか自信がない、それを判断してほしい、あるいは自分で判断するのにどう判断したらいいかという問いに対して内山老師は奥さんと子供に聞いてみろと言ったんですね。一番よく見ている、君の修行の出来を一番よく見ているのは奥さんの子供だから、自分の修行が進んだか進んでないか、それはお父さんが優しくなった、最近優しくなったなというならば修行が進んだ証拠になっている。そうじゃない、もうお父さんが最近もう座禅ばっかりして留守だし、書いたらもうこちら全然向いてくれないというんだったら何のための修行かわからない。だから当然修行によって周りの人にもっと幸せになってもらわなければいけない。つまり今までのゲームの仕方が変わらなければいけない。奥さんと喧嘩した時にはまずお前が悪いから謝れと、じゃなくて自分の方から朝はおはようございますと言えるようになったら人を幸せにできる手段にもなると思いますね。自分の生き方、自分の遊び方、このゲームの遊び方は前と変わったなと。今までは得したいとばっかり思った人はもっと太っ腹になってどうぞ私がおごるよと、そういう生き方に変わったならば周りの人を幸せにすることはできるし、最終的な目的はただ周りの人をハッピーにするだけじゃなくて、彼らもさらに周りの人をまたハッピーにできるような人たちに育ってほしい。自分が一方的に幸せじゃないものをもっと幸せにするんじゃなくて、向こうの人も周りの人をハッピーにできる人になってほしい。だからその自分が一人で違うルールでゲームをするんじゃなくて、みんなにもこういうルールがあるよと、みんなでこのルールでやったら、菩薩のルールでやったらもっと楽しいぞと、お前も菩薩の仲間になってくれと。最初の第一歩、それはこの大人の修行の問いでもそうですけれども、周りにまず一歩前に進んでもらって自分のする、その後にするんじゃなくて、まず自分が一歩進まなければ周りはついてこないけれども、こちらが何かをしてあげる、向こうのためにしてもらう、向こうはしてもらっているではなくて、一緒に菩薩の道を歩もう、菩薩という全然違うゲームをやろうという、そういうことだと思いますね。Can you make others happy through your practice? It depends on what you mean by happy, but basically my answer, that's what I mean with quitting the game and then joining the game again, but with different rules. Playing as a Bodhisattva should also make the others around you happy. That's the story of a guy who came to Antaiji when Antaiji was still in Kyoto, and Uchiyama Roshi was the abbot at the time, and they had the one-day sessions every Sunday. So that person was working from Monday to Saturday, and on Sundays he would do Zazen, and while his wife and kids were at home. And after a couple of years, he would ask Uchiyama Roshi, I'm not quite sure if I'm progressing in my practice. How can I judge if I'm making a progress or not? And Uchiyama Roshi said, you should ask your wife and kids. They know best about your practice. They know best if you make any progress or not. So if through these years of practice, all these Sundays that you spend in Antaiji, you've become a more friendly dad at home, then your kids will be the first to realize that. That's not the case. Then there must be something wrong with your practice. So if all of these hours of Zazen don't help us to change the rules of the game we play and make the game as a whole more enjoyable for the other players, then we're doing something wrong. Is there rebirth? What about Jintsu, mystical powers? That's a difficult question if you think about it in terms of, well, what was Dogen Zenji's stance on rebirth? And because when he was young, he writes certain things that seem to contradict rebirth. 道元禅師は現状コアの中では、薪が燃えたら灰になってしまう。で、灰は再び薪に戻るということはない。そこでは輪廻転生を否定しているような、発言しています。弁道話の中でも、新人脱落といって、体が死んだ後に心が残る。そんな考え方は邪道だと。下道だと言ってるんですね。信心は一つである。だから今の近代科学と結構相性がいい考え方ですけれども、要するに体が滅びて脳みそも滅びれば、そこに意識だとか魂というようなものが残って、それが生まれ変わるというのを弁道話で否定されるけれども、12巻本の道元禅師は前世のカルマとか来世再来世のカルマという話をするわけだから、そこは輪廻転生を前提にしないと理解できない。じゃあ道元禅師どうだったかわからないけど、私自身は輪廻転生あったって構わないし、なくたって構わないと思っているんですね。要は私は死んでからどうなるかわからない。今この無法をやっているやつが、無法が死んだ後に違う生き物としてこの世に戻るか。無法が死んだら、今この無法をやっている生きているやつがもうこの世から消えてない。その可能性も十分ある。で、それはあってもいい、なくてもいいと思うのは、その最初のフランクルの話もそうだけれども、今この一日をいかに深く生かして生きて、生かせてもらって生きて生かすことができる。そこがポイントだと思うんですね。今日という一日は明日のために今日を使うんじゃなくて、今日はとにかく存分に今日のうちにやらなければやらないことをやる。で、明日があったらまた明日をそれをする。明日がないんだったら、せめて今日という一日は生きてたということになるんですね。ですから、来世のために根性はおとなしくしようじゃなくて、来世があってもなくても根性はもう生きるならもう精一杯生き切りたい。来世があったならば来世もまたそれをする。なければなかったでいい。なかったで全く問題ないと私は思うんですけれども、あったらまたあったで。若い時は80、90、100歳生きるのはものすごく苦痛で死んだ方がマシだと思ったけれども、最近は全然生きることに何の文句もないんですね。このままあと30年、40年は 十分楽しく生かしてもらえるんだったら生きれると思う。ですから来世があったとしても、根性なんとかいけたんだから来世もなんとかなると思うし、もしなかったらもう最初から問題ないと私は思う。でもさっき言ったように来世のためにそもそも生きているわけじゃないから、あったら得したと思えばいいし、なかったらなかったでもともとだと。というのは私の考えですね。で、道元禅師もあれだけ矛盾したことを消防現像として残しているわけですから、そんなにこだわっていなかったんじゃないか。で、お釈迦様もこの問いに対してはっきりしたことは言ってないようですね。今ここ生きている、そういう事実がある。それをどうするか。この今日という一日、明日十中の座禅なら一中一の座禅、これをいかに座れるか。それがポイントだと思いますね。So about rebirth, I don't have a very strong view on that. I don't know if there's going to be anything after death, if there's going to be anything is going to be reborn, if there's such a thing as rebirth, I don't know what would be reborn. Well, you could say there's somebody who's muho right now. Basically, well, me. There's someone who's each of you right now. And at least in theory, it's possible that when muho dies, that someone who's muho in this life would still be in this world as a different person. So traditionally, for example, Tibetan Buddhists think that after you die, there's a certain period of time that you're kind of floating around in some ethereal existence or whatever, and then you decide, or karma decides where you're going to be reborn. It could be a human being again, it could be some other being. You could even imagine that there's no kind of time, or yes, connection there, but after Muho dies, I could be one of you, for example. Who knows? I don't know if that's the case. It's just that maybe the one who's Muho right now is actually the same as the one who's listening to Muho's talk right now over there. Just as it's often said that we're living in the eternal now. There's never been a day in the history of the world when it's not been now. Today is July 9th, and it's now. When it was July 8th, yesterday it was also now. And tomorrow when it's going to be July 10th, it's also going to be now. And although July 9th and July 10th are completely different days, different weather, it's not even going to be the same Muho. You could say it's going to be the same now. It's always the same now. The day changes. The content of the day changes. But one fact that never changes is that it's now. It's always going to be now. It's impossible to experience anything outside of that now. In the same way, you could say it's always going to be me. Although that seems to be against intuition maybe, but it's always going to be me. As long as there's going to be a world. So when you listen to my voice right now, although I can't hear it, well, I hear my voice, but I don't hear the voice as you hear it. If there's somebody who's listening to my voice right now, it's going to be me. But maybe that's just esoterical talk. I'm not really attached to the idea so much. one thing which there's no doubt about is that I'm right here on this day as Muho on July 9th in Antaiji. And I'm trying to make the best out of that. I'm trying to live that day and this Muho to the full. And if tomorrow I should be here again as Muho on July 10th, I'm gonna try and aim at the same. So the same with rebirth. If there's rebirth and after this person, Muho, dies, I should still be in the universe as somebody else, maybe as some of you, or in the more traditional Tibetan view as a future being that's somehow karmatic through karma connected to this Muho. I'm going to try to make the best of that existence. And if I'm not reborn, even better, no problems, even better, even better. But the Theravadins would say, well, you need to attain nirvana before that. Only those, the arhats, have the privilege to be not reborn. How can you expect to be erased from the universe just because Muho dies? I don't know. I'm open both ways. No problems with rebirth, but also no problems with no rebirth. What about Jintsu, mystical powers? まあ私はどちらかといえばこの六神図に対してそういう不思議ななんかオウム真理教的な意味での神図にはまあ懐疑的というか嘘じゃないかなと。だから前世が記憶としてある。まあ嘘という証拠は私にはないけれども、まあちょっと嘘臭いという気がします。ところが道元禅師は消防現像で神図の巻で面白いことをまあ書いてるんですね。まああれはその道元禅師より以前に中国にあった講案ですけれども、師匠が昼の絵から目を覚まして弟子がお茶を持ってきた。まあ、まず最初の弟子がおしぼりを持ってきたかな。おしぼりを持ってきた弟子がいる。お前に神図があると。で、次の人が来てお茶を持ってきた。さすがお前にも神図があると。本当は人の世界、人の生きている現実が分かるはずもないんだけれども、どういうわけか、相手が喉乾いたときは変わる、それは分かる場合がある。自分が喉乾いてなくても、相手が喉乾いているときはそれが分かる場合がある。自分はお腹空いてなくても、相手は、あ、お腹空いているはず。痛い時だって相手の痛みは自分の痛みとして感じることはないけれども転んだら痛いということが分かる。で道元禅師はそれこそ神図だというんですね。要するに人の気持ちが分かる。それが本当の神図であってそれとなんか九と山の向こうの景色が見える。日本海まで私が神図を使って見えたらそれはすごい力だけれども今向こうで日本海が見えたとしても人の気持ちが分からなければ何の意味がある。逆に日本海がここから見えなくたっていいけれども人の気持ちが分からなければいけない。それが本当の神図だと思うんですね。人の気持ちが分かる。So mystical powers, what are mystical powers? According to Dogen Zenji, it's basically that you understand the people around you. Even though you're not thirsty, you understand when somebody's thirsty. Even though you're not the one who's hungry, when somebody's hungry, you understand they're hungry. Because you know what it feels to be hungry. So even if I could see from here to the Japanese Sea through the mountain, I would have kind of X-ray view. but I wouldn't understand how you feel. What's the worth of that visual power? The real mystical power that, if mystical powers are important in Buddhism, then it would be the mystical power to understand how somebody feels. That's what's important, not to know facts from past lives or to know the future, but to understand how the people feel that you live with, that you share your life with. Okay, so much from your side. If there's more questions or comments from your side, please ask. 私の方からまずここまでです。
Ich habe keine Frage, aber ich möchte mich für morgen ausklinken. Ich bin morgen nicht dabei.
Oh, okay. Bist du auf deinem Zimmer oder machst du eine Spaziergang oder wie?
Nee, ich werde so früh wie möglich abreisen,
okay,
um niemanden zu stören.
Also, okay.
Genau, das ist eine Nummer zu groß für mich. Die letzten Tage waren okay, waren anstrengend genug, aber das ist für mich too much.
Okay.
Weil ich, wie gesagt, sitze das erste Mal in Zazen und von dem her traue ich mir das nicht zu. Wie gesagt, ich möchte die ernsthaften Praktizierenden nicht stören und es würde meinerseits nicht kommen. Und deshalb sage ich es jetzt. Und, ja.
Das ist deine Entscheidung.
Ja, genau.
Also der erste Bus wäre um 7:30, ne? 7:30 Uhr. Der zweite Bus ist um 9 Uhr.
Von?
Das sind 3,5 Kilometer, 4 Kilometer von hier, den Berg runter. Ne? Also nach 2 Kilometern kommt dieses Blockhaus, diese Blockhütte.
Okay.
Und da wird der Weg ein bisschen breiter und dann hast du nochmal 2 Kilometer und dann kommst du an die Straße. Da ist so eine kleine Kläranlage davor. Wenn du an die Straße kommst, wenn du genau hinschaust, auf der linken Seite ist so ein Bushalteschild. Der Bus, der nach Hamasaka ist, der fährt aber auf der anderen Seite. Ne?
Also
7:30 ist der erste Bus. Ne?
Okay. Ich möchte mich auch sehr bedanken.
Ja, danke, dass du hier warst.
Und auch bei den Teilnehmern, waren alle sehr sympathisch und nett. Aber wie gesagt, ich traue es mir nicht zu, nicht körperlich und nicht psychisch. Und von dem her, ja, danke trotzdem. Vielen Dank.
Danke fürs Kommen und ja, noch gute Reise.
Dankeschön.
Wenigstens hast du ein Bad. Und wenigstens hast du das Onsen heute.
Ja, genau. Das kann man mitnehmen. Ja, und den Vortrag. Ja.
Any other questions? 他に質問などありませんか? Hi.
今ここは何ですか?
今ここ。まあ前奏はこれをよくやるんだけれども、一瞬今ここに引き戻されると思う。多分この2時間ずっと私の声を聞いて、私の喋ってる話の内容を理解しようと思ってたと思う。イーファンさんはずっと意味の世界の中で、無法が何を言ってるのかな、こういうことかな、こういうことかなと。でこの声を聞いたりとかビンタ打たれたりとかすると一瞬痛いだけ。それは要するにマップ、地図を作る前の現実ですね。それが今ここ。ただ私たち、特にそのイーファンさんは多分頭で勝ちでルッキツっぽい人だから、いつもこのマップで地図の中で、僕は今この地図、Google マップで今どこかなって動いている。これ、打たれたら痛い。雨に降られると濡れる。暑い、寒い。お腹すく。転んだら痛い。それが今ここ。考え事しているのも今ここ。もちろん今ここ。 Google マップスとか iPad とか iPhone も今ここにあるものだけれども、それを見ているときは自分の心はもうこの今ここを忘れて、今ここの中の別の地図の中に入っちゃう。で、そういう意味ではもう今ここにいないということになってしまう。もちろん首より下の体はいつも今ここ。だけれども頭はそこから違う世界に入ろうとするから、内山老師は頭を手放せという。だから座禅の時もこの痛いと感じたとしても、それを今ここの現実として受けてもらって、そこから地図に逃げないように、マップの中に逃げないことが大事。So that was a question about the here and now. We're always in the here and now, but while we're in the here and now, we already have this map in our mind. And maybe some of you during these 2 hours were listening to me talking here and now, but you were thinking about the meaning. Does it mean this, or maybe it does mean that? So it takes place already on that map. And often Zen monks give these shouts, or sometimes not here in Antaiji, but in other monasteries, people were quite freewheeling with slapping you in the face, for example. And I don't want to justify kind of violence in Zen monastic environment, but the good thing that happens when somebody slaps you in the face, in that moment you return to the here and now. There's for an instant, just like with this shout, you're here and now, and you don't think about the meaning. Maybe an instant later, 2 instants later, you think about, oh, what was the meaning of the shout? Or there's the famous story of a master who cut off his student's finger and he got enlightened. But then maybe a week later, the student already thinks, oh, well, at least it's only my small finger, at least he didn't cut off my thumb. So then you're already in the game again, in the map again. You're making comparisons, you're trying to make sense of it. But the moment somebody cuts off your finger, then you're in the here and now. So there's nothing wrong with thinking and making maps, but we should stay grounded in the reality that we are making the map of. And that's the reason why Zen masters always say you can't actually express it in words, because words are part of the map. The map is only there that's supposed to help you. There was a question. I forgot who asked me that question. Why do we study the Dharma when it's all about practice in the first place? So practice basically means to get back to the here and now. And you could compare it, for example, to climbing a mountain. And if you want to climb a mountain, you have to put on your boots and to get out of the house and into the forest. The problem is that although you can see the mountain clearly from here, once you're in the forest, you don't see the mountaintop anymore. Maybe there's a river and you don't know how you can cross the river. So that's when you need a map. And that's kind of the Dharma study we do here. We don't do Dharma study too often, but every 5 days we do have a talk like this, and then during the winter it's pretty intense. Why do we do that? Because you also need a certain grasp of the landscape, and a certain amount of mapping isn't wrong. It's just that what can happen is that when you do too much of this, you only spend your time on the map, and you compare this map with another map, and you never put your boots on, and you never get into the forest. And you might have a clear idea where the mountaintop is on your map, but you never get to the mountain. So, of course, practicing is the most important thing. It's not about studying, but studying can help to clarify the direction where you're heading it, or what we're trying to do here in the first place. But it doesn't replace what we're going to do tomorrow. when we're sitting on the cushion. And all what I said today about accepting the pain, I don't know how much use that will have for you tomorrow as a map. I hope it can give you some direction, but what's going to happen tomorrow on the cushion will be quite different from maybe what now you have on your map, and you say, oh, that's okay, not fighting, not fleeing, just accepting the pain, dying on the cushion, I will do that. good luck. It's possible, but it's in reality it's something different than from what you imagine on the map. Any other questions? 他に質問ありませんか？はい、お願いします。
まあ、その結局修行っていうのは自分で一人でやるしかないっていうことなんですけど、そのまあ、お昼こういう騒動があることで、まあ、ネルさん接心できたり、まあ、2時間はプラス2時間デイリー禅ができるっていうことだったんですけど、じゃあその共に修行する仲間が果たす役割っていうのは何に結局一人でするしかないのであるならば何になるということ
なんですかね。結局は自分一人なんだけれども、ザフに腰を下ろすまでの道のりは結構長いと思いますね。自分一人で座っていると、まずザフに座るまでは大変だし、いざ座ったとしても、まあそこでスマホがプルプルとなんか鳴ったりとか、メールが届いたとか、いろんな邪魔が入って、立ち上がっても誰も止めはしない。だからすぐ中断する。10人で座った場合は結局自分の座禅、そこは違わないけれども、ザフまでの道のりはすごく近い。もう朝3時45分という、普通世間では誰も起きないような時はもう起きざるを得ない。で、なかなかアレックさんみたいに私は途中でやめますというのもかなりの覚悟がいる。みんなまだ残るのに自分だけ下手したら負け犬と思われるかもしれないとかそういう思いもある。自分一人だったらすぐやめるのに、総理の中だとなかなかやめない。まあ途中で逃げ出す人もたまたまいるけれども、やっぱりそれもそれなりの覚悟がいる。一人でやると逆に続けるのに覚悟がいる。だからまあ一人で修行できたらそれこそまあすごい大人の修行ではあるけれども、それができるまでやっぱりこういう場所でまあ保育園的な修行にまず慣れて、私もまあ25から33で運水としてやっていくけれども、それでようやく、まあ、大阪でホームレスをやって毎朝座禅ができるようになったと思うけれども、それは25歳いきなりもう大学生大学院生で毎朝2時間できてたかというとそうじゃないと思いますね。8年間ここでまあ、自分なりで畑を耕して少し根を下ろしてようやくできたと思いますね。最終的にはもう自分の修行なんだけれども、やっぱり仲間の価値は、計り知れない。そういう意味ではそれは言える。ただいくら仲間が言ったとしても自分のことはやってくれない。天蔵当番一つだって変わってくれないし、一中の座禅だって誰も変わってくれない。まあ日本にツレションという習慣があるけれども、結局執行は自分一人でするしかしょうがないという、それと同じですね。 げれば何でもどうぞ。No more questions.
How to develop jihi?
Jihi?
Jihi.
Compassion?
Yeah. And does it matter whether to develop it or not? If so, then how to?
Well, there's two approaches about compassion. 慈悲については2つのアプローチがありますけれども、一つはもう積極的に慈悲の瞑想で座禅中に生きとし生けるものが幸せでありますようにと。私も私に親しい家族もそして嫌なやつもみんな幸せでありますようにというのを座禅をしながら心の中で祈るというアプローチですね。でも禅ではそれはあまりしない。私もしない。私の場合はそれこそ死ぬかもしれないけれども一度死んでみようと初めてその気になった時にすごく楽になったというか、新人脱落と言ったら大げさだけれども、これだったのか。道元禅師は仏の肩より運ばれてというような表現をするけれども、座禅が座禅をする、こういうことだったのかと。ですごくありがたいというか、感謝もするし、もったいない。もったいないというような気持ちもそこであって、で何か要するに自分の力でそれに手に入れたんじゃなくてもこうから贈り物としてもらっちゃったようなそんな感じなので、何かを返したい、恩返ししたいという気持ちが普通にその後に出てきた。それまでは全くない。でも少しそこで人にも、それを共有したい、シェアしたいという気持ちはそこで少し出てきたんですね、慈悲。自分は救われた。それまでは苦しい。自殺するにも勇気がない。でも生きるのも嫌だなという、そんな年数長かったけれども、ありがたい、今ここに自分が置かれて世界が開かれていることはありがたい。でもおそらくかつての自分と同じようにまだ気づいてない人は多くいるんだろう。人にもそういう気づきを持ってほしい。それは私が思う慈悲ですね。それが自然にその後芽生えてくると思いますね。About compassion, well, there's two approaches. One is to proactively, during meditation, hope for one's own happiness, but also the happiness of the family, the happiness of all living beings, including one's rivals and people one does not like. So one hopes for the happiness of even one's enemies, and that would be compassion. Or at first maybe one chants these verses like a mantra and doesn't even really believe that one wants one's enemies to be happy, but maybe one grows into that. But in Zen, usually we don't practice that kind of meditation. From my experience, it's more like when you at one point get ready for letting go on the cushion, and even if it costs your life, you say, okay, then I'm gonna die here on the cushion. But then you don't die, but you're surprised that you're still alive. And in my case, until then, it was always like, I don't have the courage to die. I'm not in a hurry to die, but I don't really want to live either. And then when I go through this like hole of a needle where it's like, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, this is killing me, this is killing me. But then you let go and wow, I'm still alive, and it's great, it's wonderful. And at that point, I felt that, oh, I need to give something back, something that I never felt before. Before, I always felt I'm entitled to more. I didn't ask to be born into this world. I didn't ask to be born as this muho. I didn't ask to be born into this time and age of human history. People owe me something back for the fact that I'm born at this time as this person. When will I get my reimbursement for this flight that I never booked in the first place? And that changed when I realized, oh, it's actually wonderful to be alive, and I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything for this one day, and I got it. I'm here on the cushion with the pain, but it doesn't even hurt so bad when you think about it. And that's the first time I thought, well, maybe I can help others who think the same way I thought until yesterday. So from my point of view, you don't have to artificially try to become a more compassionate person, but once you realize, wow, everything I have in this moment was given to me as a present. I didn't do anything for it. So maybe I shouldn't be so, how do you say, stingy with what I have, with my money and with my time and with even my body and mind. It's all given to me. So why don't I give a little bit to the others in the hope that they have the same realization? So that's my take on compassion.
And the other is that does it truly made better, or because
you should give it a try.
You should give it, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who practice that, especially in Theravada tradition. But you can also try in maybe even tomorrow if you feel really bad, and maybe it takes your mind off the pain, that can pray for the happiness of all living beings, including your enemies.
From your current explanation and your experience of Zazen, and I know that there's no Zazen's good for nothing, but it sounds like it provides a function in your day-to-day life, and almost like a reality check in a sense. It brings you back to, you know, your being reality right now. And I'm wondering, because I feel like you could almost get addicted to Zazen, and how could you be neutral about not sitting for, or can you sit for wanting to have that reality check, or are you trying how do you sit without it becoming a necessity in your life? Or maybe it is a necessity, but I don't know how to.
Without becoming addicted to Zazen?
Yes.
Probably there's not many, but there is in fact a few people who get addicted to Zazen, or kind of they basically hate the game, so they want to be free from the game as long as possible. There's 24 hours of the day. Their ideal would be to spend 24 hours of the day in Zazen. And maybe they have to take a pee, and maybe they have to eat a little bit, but they try to reduce that to the minimum. And at least from the Mahayana perspective, there's a problem with that, because you can't help others to escape the game. If only you escape the game, so what? So what? There's one person liberated, but how about the rest? What do you do for the rest? And if the answer is nothing, that's not such a good answer. So the reality check At Antaiji, well, that's why we have Samu, that's why we have retreats, that's why we talk with visitors, that's why we answer the phone. We go to town from time to back. It's not that we try to be as secluded from society as possible, but we stay in touch with society. We make ourselves available. We even have Wi-Fi here. You probably noticed already I'm spending a lot of time also to be on YouTube and stuff like that. That's time that I'm obviously not spending doing Zazen. But well, even if you're here as a training monk, doing Zazen like say 3,000 hours a year is not an option. Like you can do, even if you do all the Hosan Zazen, probably at one point somebody's gonna get you out of the room and tell you, well, hey, can you check the electric fence? That's more important than sitting. So that's when the reality check happens.
But I mean, do you think it's all right that we sit Zazen for that purpose of like using Zazen as a reality check, grounding you back to, because it almost sounds contradictory to the fact that, you know, it's good for nothing, but again, I feel like it's good for realizing you're here and now, and that kind of sounds like it's something as well.
Well, in a way, it's kind of, you could even say Zazen is the only thing that's good for something. Because everything else is just part of the game. Even mindfulness, as it's usually taught in society, is just a tool to make you better at the game. So if you think about that the game is going to be over sooner or later, and the time that you spend absorbed in the game is time that you lose sight of this one day that you have only once. Actually, everything except Zazen is good for nothing. And Zazen is the only thing that's good for something because it brings you back into this one day. And hey, you have only this one day once in your life. And that's now. And if you don't live it now, nobody is going to do it, and you can't do it tomorrow. You might have another day tomorrow if you're lucky and live it now. So Zazen is, in that respect, yes, it's good for something, and maybe it's the only thing that's good for something. Nothing else? We have no bedtime, but tomorrow's going to be early, so if you have no more questions, I would finish here. And yeah, all the best to you, Axel. Thank you for coming, and I hope that I see the rest of you tomorrow for the campfire. I mean, maybe you want to join Axel. It's always possible, but hopefully we can have a campfire tomorrow. Okay, thank you for listening, and thank you for your questions for the Dharma talk. There's a second part of the chant, you find it on the paper. It starts with Shuzhou Muhen. Shuzhou Muhen Sei